So I posted this on Facebook, and I posted a lot of similar sentiments on social media. This got a much bigger reaction than my previous posts on this topic, which I think is in part due to the fact that people are looking at the ceasefire and they're saying, wow, why didn't the Democrats get that ceasefire sooner? Why did it take a Trump to put his oar in the water to apparently accomplish that? What's behind that? And I think that has caused, even among relatively loyal Democrats, if they're progressive, to start questioning to a degree they hadn't the real quality of this party. So I wrote, given that a Trump-instigated ceasefire in Gaza appears imminent, isn't it past time for progressive Democrats to give up their toxic claim that their party is the lesser evil and to unite in support of an emerging pro-worker, pro-peace, pro-environment party? So that's been my view for quite a long time, certainly during the campaign. And the reason I say it's time to give up your toxic claim, because your party isn't. I mean, a lot of people used to say, and I remember hearing this argument, which I didn't always buy, and I don't always buy it, which is the lesser evil is still evil, so you can't vote for it. No, there's always going to be a lot of issues, and you have to weigh them in the balance, and maybe if you're really good on this issue, we'll overlook how you're not as good on that. My point is now that the Democrat Party isn't even less evil, right? It's just as evil, or almost. I mean, any differences are de minimis. I used to say also, it's not that you're a lesser evil, it's that you're doing harm. That in the end, I'm not going to vote for a party that's policies on balance are making things worse and worse and worse. And clearly that would fit both parties. But here I'm saying, hey, even if you're one of those who said, hey, I don't love the Democrat Party, I see why your criticisms, I think they're fair. Yes, they're too beholden to corporate America. Yes, they haven't addressed the climate crisis the way they should have. But on balance, they're not as bad as the Republicans. They're less evil, and we have a better chance of making real progress if they're in power. That would be the argument. And now I'm saying, but they're not less evil, right? We can now say with some degree of confidence, when we look at what has happened in Gaza, and I certainly would say when we look at what's happened in Ukraine as well, we can't say they're less evil. And since they're not less evil, there's zero argument to vote for them, because you're not going to get anything that's any less bad than if the Republicans win. Even if you're able to somehow push the Democrats over the top, you're not getting something that's less bad. So let's all come together and support an alternative, right? That seems to be kind of clear, actually. I mean, I don't really think it's a confusing view. So that's it's got a lot of response. So I want to just show a couple of them. We have one of my commenters who's been very, very opposed, very much against my positions, who says, that would be nice, but we have a single member district, first past the post system. You're going to have a two-party system, period, that way. The best strategy is to change the Democrat Party into a pro-worker, pro-peace, pro-environment party. So I'm not going to give my response, but I would say I agree that a first past the post system makes it very, very difficult to have alternative to the two parties. Although in, for example, the UK, we have seen some viable alternative parties, even though they have first past the post, right? The districts there, parliament, you have lots and lots of little districts, and each district is represented by the candidate who gets the most votes. So they have a first past the post system there. They have a parliamentary system, though, when choosing prime minister. So you can have a situation in that case where, I guess, if you can get a few districts, if you can win a few districts by a plurality of the vote, the Liberals, I don't think they even do, right? Because the two main parties, it's still pretty much two parties. UK is Tories or Conservative Tories, same thing, Labour. two parties, but you do have UKIP in Scotland. You do have the Liberal Party that seem to get a few votes. So with the parliamentary system where the majority of the House of Labour determines who's prime minister, right? They vote, they decide who it's going to be. Yeah, if you can get a few districts, if you can win a few of those districts, and they're very, very small, which also makes it easier for an emerging party, right? Because if you have a district with 50,000 that have, 50,000, say, South Indian, just people of South Indian descent, which you do have in England, or 50,000, and the majority of them are factory workers, mill workers, then maybe you can rally them behind an alternative party. And to the extent that you get that, some reps in the House of Labour and Parliament who are from an alternative party, then they will have some say, presumably, if there's a relative equipoise between Tories and Labour, then yeah, you have to appeal to them to get the prime minister to have a coalition government. So I think the point that this commenter is making is actually extremely accurate. It's going to be really, really tough not to have two parties. But that doesn't mean we don't replace one of the parties, right? Okay, the Democrat Party has to go. That's fine. We're only going to have two parties. Let's get rid of the Democrat Party. Then let's get rid of the Republican. I'd be happy to get rid of the Republican. But we need a party to the left of the Democrats, period. So yeah, we do. But it's not going to be one of those two. And they go on, in other words, a pro-worker, pro-peace, pro-environment party is not going to be either of the two that we have now. That's not going to happen. And their argument, therefore, is we have to change the Democrat Party. I'm saying that's not going to happen. You can't change the Democrat Party. You've been trying to do that. We've been trying for 40 years, 50 years. One of the points that this commenter made was, well, the Democrat Party has gotten, grudgingly acknowledging, yes, there have been some problems recently, and the Democrat Party became anti-worker under Clinton. It's actually not accurate. The Democrat Party had already moved forcibly away from labor. And there's an article in The Nation that talks about how Jimmy Carter embraced many neoliberal ideas. And that would have been 12 years, right, before Clinton. Actually, more than 12. Is it 12? I guess it would be 12. Clinton took power in 92, right? And Carter took power in 76. So really it was 16 years. 16 years from the one inauguration to the next. So the two, between the inauguration of a Democrat in 1976 and then the next inauguration of a Democratic president in 1992. That's a long time, 16 years. And I would make the point that the Democrat Party had long before Clinton already begun to abandon the working class. And we've seen no significant movement back to the working class. You aren't going to change this party. It is just in thrall to the billionaire class. So another comment, my comment being, hey, look at, it was Trump, right? Not even by Trump ever. We heard from the report yesterday that the pressure that Trump put on Bibi was probably a significant factor. Pressure that was levied. That was the word. That was the L word. Never, the LEV word, levied. Pressure that was never levied by Harris Biden. And this was this comment. Is it also possible, and I like how it's questioned, is it also possible that Trump and Netanyahu planned this together to get him elected, similar to the Reagan election, right? And that would be referring to the release of the hostages held by Iran, and then the Iran-Contra scandal, and then just a thought. And also we saw that very possibly in 1968, when Nixon was apparently in some sort of secret dialogue with the Viet Cong and pressuring them not to agree to any peace deal with the Johnson-Humphrey administration. So we have seen that before. And my response was, and I don't think I have it here, I didn't put it, but is absolutely, yes. I think it's very plausible to believe that Trump was working with Netanyahu and pressuring Netanyahu not to cut any ceasefire deal with Harris Biden. But I hardly see that. I do think that's probably, well, I mean, they've said that. The Israelis have said that. They said, hey, he kept telling us he was on our side. We could do whatever we wanted. He wasn't going to put any strings on us. There wouldn't be any shaming. And then the next thing we know, he's telling Bibi to make a deal. And I think maybe Netanyahu was in a position where he was glad he could say, yeah, Trump is holding me back. He's stopping me before I can kill again. I think there's probably a lot of truth to that. But is that any excuse? Does that provide any excuse for the Democrats for their actions? No, of course not. You could argue, well, they couldn't broker peace with Israel because Israel was bound and determined not to stop killing Palestinians until Trump was in power, was about to be. You could make that argument. The problem with that argument is Harris Biden never made any efforts to stop Israel from killing. They kept green lighting everything Israel did. They kept funneling more and more weapons. What was the deal? $8 billion just a couple of weeks ago. Biden was calling for Israel to get in supplies, $8 billion worth of supplies, of military supplies, of weaponry. There was no legitimate effort at any point by Harris Biden to rein Israel in. So if Trump was able to get it done, good. Even if there was some sort of behind the scenes conversations with Netanyahu. Harris Biden never made the effort. And that failure, by the way, they could have. I mean, look, this has been going on for well over a year, long before the election. And that failure is very likely the reason Harris lost. So again, that's just how bad this party is. They are complicit in a genocide. They at no point took any steps to try to stop the genocide. They put no pressure on the country that is actually committing the genocide. They enabled the genocide, and they did all of that, even though it very well likely may have cost them the election. That's just how bad this party is. That's why you have to move away from this party. That's why there's no possibility of redemption for this party. Poll shows price Harris paid for backing Israeli genocide. Israel is a liability, said one Palestinian American rights activist. Seemed like there's no question about that. Now, you could argue, well, it's not true, Al. Look at how Jamal Bowman, you can point to a few House races. I agree. In certain districts, and I think that is an argument. It's a legit argument because AIPAC has so much money, so much sway as a result of that money. And in certain districts, it can move the needle. On the other side, we see plenty of districts where it couldn't, right? Summerlee won. They hate Summerlee. Ilhan Omar won. Rashida Tlaib won. They all won. And they have been among the more critical voices against Israel. In Kentucky, Representative Thomas Massey, has consistently been an advocate for peace in Kentucky. And he wins. So obviously AIPAC's power is limited. The problem, though, is that because the Democratic Party isn't united against Israel, against the genocide, because there's not, you don't know, because you're a Democrat, that means you're for peace. You're against wanton, indiscriminate killing based on ethnicity, geography, religion. Because of that, AIPAC can pick and choose and in some districts win. If you had a party that said, no, we're always against genocide. We're never going to support what Israel's doing. If they said that, yeah, they might not win Westchester County. Like Jamal Bowman might not win. You might not win suburban Washington, meaning Donna Edwards might lose to Glen Ivy, if you know the districts I'm talking about. But that said, you'd win a lot of districts that you haven't won. You'd have a much better shot at a real majority, at a sizable majority. And how do we know that? Well, this YouGov poll, backed by, and there are some questions about this poll, I got to admit, it's not perfect, found that they found, I didn't know that. Did you know that 19 million people voted for Biden in 2020, but did not vote in 2024? So those aren't even crossed over. There probably are a few who crossed over from Biden to Trump, but almost 20 million, 19 million Americans who voted for Biden. I assume these are not people who died, but did not vote in 2020. Of that 19 million, 29%, they say nearly a third, 29% said the top reason, the number one reason that they did not vote for Harris is because of her unwavering support for the Harris-Biden war, the killing, the slaughter. 29% of 19 million. And they give it a little bit more context in this article. So I want to just give you that just because I think it's worth it. They put this, because all you hear about is, oh, it's the price of eggs, right? Bill Maher mocking, dismissive, making fun of Trump voters. Oh, they care more about the price of eggs than democracy. Well, you know what? Apparently that's not even the case. What I think most of these voters care about more, or what the plurality of voters care about more than the price of eggs, is they care about our government backing a genocide. And if that's the case, and I think it is, why wouldn't we believe that? You have to give the voters a hell of a lot of credit, don't you? Instead of making fun of them and saying, oh, they were worried about maybe they can only have a medium-sized egg instead of large. Instead of making fun of them, maybe you say, oh, they're moral, decent people, these Americans who won't vote for Harris. They're good human beings. In fact, they're better than I am. Maybe that's what Bill Maher should be saying to himself. They just don't want to vote for genocide. Wow. Pretty powerful stuff, isn't it? And it isn't just the voters who didn't vote for Harris and who didn't vote, who had voted for Biden, who said, we care about Gaza. We don't like what Biden and Harris are doing there. It wasn't just the voters who said, no, we're not going to vote for Harris. It was even the voters who did vote for Harris who didn't like her policy there. And the reason why that's important is because it tells you that had Harris taken a moral stance, right? Had she actually shown some concern for human beings, it wouldn't have hurt her. Because even her own voters didn't like her policy. They would have liked her better. Instead of losing votes, she would have had more supportive voters, more eager voters, more excited voters if she had supported peace. 35 to 5 margin, they would have been more enthusiastic, Harris voters, had she stood up to Israel a little bit. And the remainder saying it wouldn't have made no difference, which I actually think is pretty darn plausible. You say, how could that be true, Hal? Come on, at least some of Harris voters had to be Zionists, had to be staunch Israel supporters. They had to be people like the Liz Cheneys. And yeah, there are some Liz Cheneys out there, right, who probably wouldn't have liked it if Harris had come out against Israel. I'm guessing that's true. By the way, if you hear some hammering, I was so hoping they wouldn't start up. They're doing roof work, so I may have to cut this short because I don't want to have that noise. But the people who really care about unwavering support for Israel, they were voting for Trump anyway. So presumably she lost a minimum of 29% of 20 million votes. How many votes did she lose to Trump in the popular count. Because remember, though, she lost a popular vote. Everyone's saying he has a mandate because he got more votes than she did. So she lost the popular vote to Trump by about 2.3 million. 2.3 million. 29% of 19 million. I did the math. 29% of 19 million is 5.5 million. So more than twice the difference, right? She lost more than twice as many votes as she lost the election because of her support for Israel, unwavering, unconditional, her commitment to Israel. Under that poll, it cost her 5.5 million votes. She lost to Trump by 2.3 million. She lost by well under 50% to Trump compared to the number of votes that she didn't get because of her support for Israel. That means she would have won. That just means, quite simply, she would have won. She would have beaten Trump by millions of votes. Would that have been enough to win the election? Because after all, Hillary voted for, Hillary beat Trump, right, by a sizable number in the popular count. And she still lost to Trump. So maybe even with those votes, even with those 3 million plus votes, those 3 million extra votes, Harris would have still lost. Possible. But let's just look at the numbers. Let's just look at the numbers. Again, the point here is that support for Israel very, very probably is why Donald Trump. In other words, Kamala Harris's unwavering commitment to Israel is very likely the reason why Trump will be in the White House come Monday. Nationwide, Trump garnered about 2.2 million votes more than Harris. But she lost 5.5 million votes because of her support for Israel, based on that poll. Obviously, who knows if it's true. But to the extent we can come to some reasonable conclusions, that's not unreasonable. In 2016, Hillary beat Trump by under 3 million votes. If Harris had gotten those 5.5 million votes, and I think that may understate the amount, she'd gotten that, she would have beaten Trump by well over 3 million votes. She lost the swing states, the blue wave states, by 80,000. The blue wall, she lost by 80,000. Sure looks like it was her support, Harris's support for Israel, for the genocide, Biden's support for the genocide. That's why Trump is going to be president. Really not complicated, folks. Harris-Biden gave Trump that weapon. You can say, well, Trump worked it out with Bibi so that the ceasefire would occur just when he was taking office. Maybe. But the only reason Trump could make that deal with Bibi is because Harris-Biden gave him that gift, their unconditional unsupport for Israeli genocide. One more argument for the Dems, because this is all in service to my point, which is you can't support the Democrat Party, that they're not a lesser evil. They're just as evil. And if they're just as evil, there's zero reason to vote for them, to support them. So there's one more argument that I saw that I really wanted to share with you. Hopefully the new DNC, maybe, so the point is, Hallie makes some really good points about how bad the Democrat Party has been, how corrupt it is, how evil it is. But maybe that'll change, right? We can always hope. Maybe this new DNC chair will make things better. I saw Joy Reid talking about the other day. Maybe they'll be better at messaging. And I would say, I don't care a rat's ass about messaging. I care about policy. You can dress up a baboon, it's still a baboon, right? It's not messaging, it's policy. The Democratic policies are awful. They're wrong. They're immoral. They're evil. They're corrupt. But the point that this commenter is making is, I don't even think the Dems they're changing, but maybe they'll be, which I think means they don't agree that they're as bad as I say. But maybe we'll get a change with a new Democratic chair. Ain't happening. I watched this video from Breaking Points, right, with Sagar and Crystal, which I sometimes think that show's not so bad. I have to say this. Sagar keeps Crystal a little more honest than her husband. Kalinsky's just real. He is a terrible progressive. He's one of the worst these days. Crystal and Sagar are a lot better. I thought this was a really interesting interview, not because they held Faz Shakir's feet to the fire, because they didn't. But what you learn is that even if this former Bernie, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess it's campaign chair. That was his title, right? He was number one for Bernie. He was Brianna Joy Gray's boss. She was the communications director. He was the campaign director. Even if this guy who worked for Bernie and now has thrown his hat in the ring becomes the DNC chair, don't expect any changes. I want to say the DNC chair has real power. They're influential. They matter. But in the end, what really matters is who are the electeds. Right? In the end, the people who drive the Democratic bus are the Congress members and the senators and president, if there's a president, even more so. So Barack Obama influenced far more the Democratic National Committee than anybody when he was president. Because Biden is demented, he lost a lot of, whatever fastball he ever had, he hasn't been able to have much influence. But the party pretty much tracks the lead. The DNC committee pretty much tracks the corporatist lead of Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer, right? They do what. So even if you got a Faz Shakir, he would have limited ability to change the direction of this Titanic. That is the Democratic Party. But even if he were to win, he doesn't even appear to have any interest in changing its direction. Let's go to the interview.
And say, I'm asking you to make a choice of, do you really want a working class party? We can get into the substance of it, of how you change it, but that's the case.
Yeah, so I've had a similar frustration. I talked to Marianne Williamson last week, who also is running. I think she'd acknowledge is, pretty long shot because she comes in as a total outsider. And I think she has that larger vision, but the top contenders.
So let me stop that. I don't see why anyone would think Marianne Williamson has that larger vision. I mean, her vision, I guess maybe it comes from her crystals. I know she hates when people make fun of her as a self-help guru, but that's what she is. I mean, that's what you are, right? I mean, you give these big speeches and sell these books on how to empower yourself that are very, very long on BS and short on any real substance. So, of course, people are going to make fun of you for that. And to give Williamson some credit, yes, she has been good on certain policies, certainly Medicare for all. And would I think she would have been a better president or a less bad president than Harris? Biden? Yeah, probably, because her policies are on balance better. But I'd hardly say she has much of a vision. And she certainly never acknowledged the depravity of Israel. She's never been able to acknowledge that. She supported the Biden war, proxy war with Russia. I remember I talked to her personally and I made some, trenchant points about how bad the Democrat Party, and she didn't want to hear it. She's like, oh no, there's no comparison. There's no comparison between Biden and Trump. Okay. So yeah, she's a partisan. She's a partisan hack, and what Americans want more than anything else is somebody who isn't a partisan hack, who's going to say, no, the Democrat Party is wrong. No, the Democrat Party needs to change. No, we need to get the money out of this party. We need to be a pro-worker party. And here's how we get there. We stop taking corporate money. We start embracing an end to, for example, offshoring and outsourcing. Card check. There are many specific policies. I want to get into all of it. Is that what? That's not what Marianne Williamson said. To a degree. But is Faz Shakir promoting that vision of a no longer corrupt corporate Democratic Party? Let's find out.
With you, it feels like shifting deck chairs around on the Titanic. So the rhetoric might be good about, we got to be a working class party, and it's like, okay, well, how are you going to do? Well, I think we should allocate a little more money to this, this state or that state or whatever. It's like, well, I don't think that's really going to get the job done. So what is your broader vision for how the Democratic Party turns around what has come to be an utter catastrophe among working class Americans?
So you start with the problem. What is the problem? Right now we are losing alignment with working class people. We saw in the election and people sitting out. So you say, okay, well, you need that.
So he says the problem. She says, well, okay, we hear a lot of rhetoric. It's not a working class party anymore. And people come up with supposed answers, but they're kind of just fiddling on the edges. They're not real meaningful directional changes for the Democratic Party. So what would you do? Right? So he immediately tries to define the problem. The problem isn't as Faz Shakir. Remember, this is a Bernie guy. Bernie ran as an independent. Bernie in 2016 garnered enormous support because he was as critical, or nearly so, of the Democrats as of the Republicans. Faz Shakir is going to, and he already just said it, he defines the problem, he circumscribes it as one of a loss of votes. The problem is that we're not getting support from the working class. That's not the problem. The problem is that your policies aren't pro-worker. They're anti-worker. They're not pro-consumer. They're anti-consumer. They're pro-corporate. They're pro-billion. The problem isn't that you're not winning working class votes. That's a symptom of the cancer that has metastasized through the Democratic Party. The corporate cancer, the corruption cancer. So he immediately demonstrates he will not make this party better, does Shakir, because he identifies the problem as not getting enough support from workers, not that we are anti-worker. Anyone who thinks this guy is going to change the party, no. And this is about as good as you could hope for, right? A Bernie Sanders guy. He doesn't acknowledge the real problem.
Everyone acknowledges that's the North Star. And so how do you solve it? What's the problem? And I look at like the grassroots nature of this party as having been dilapidated. There's no conception of using organizing to say we need to reconnect with people.
So we need to reconnect, we need to use organizing tactics to reconnect, we need to change our policy. Not that we need to embrace Medicare for all. Not that we need to work with Trump on smart tariffs that will maximize creation of good jobs in this country. There's none of that. It's just messaging. He's not going to make this party better. You don't have any hope of a better Democratic Party if Faz Shakir is the DNC chair.
That was a healthy list, a convening body. How would you do that if you really cared about working class people? Well, when Boeing workers go on strike, Crystal, do you think the DNC should play a role in letting people know that the Boeing workers are out there, that we could go and stand with them, that we could get pizza to the strike line? When the UAW is organizing, do you think the DNC could mobilize a community and say, hey, we stand with you? When people are fighting in tenant unions trying to advocate.
So again, yes, we should stand with workers. The Democratic Party should. But again, he's not saying we need to embrace the policies. We need to promote a better environment. Forget about even the strikers. We have to have laws that protect workers. He doesn't say that. He's just like, again, oh, here's an opportunity for us. There's a bunch of people on strike. Let's go out and join the strike. Let's all get in front of the parade.
And trying to stop unreasonable rate hikes. Can we do something about that? It's thinking substantively. You are a working class person living a life. You are struggling. I, at the DNC, have some authority. I don't have full authority. I don't run the world, but I have some ability to say, I stand with you to do something to move the dial on your behalf. That's a
and again, he doesn't say what it is.
Not only of organizing capacity and the state capacity to stand with working class people, but then I think you broaden that out to say, well, people are not always thinking about politics. You and I know, Crystal. Like they're thinking about, let's say, football. Could we hold Super Bowl watch parties together?
So this is Faz Shakir's solution to stanch the loss of working class support. Let's have Super Bowl watch parties. That's I mean, so utterly tone deaf that anyone who says something that clearly has no real conception of the troubles, the challenges working class people face, whether it's just simply paying their bills, staying in their home, figuring out how they can get their child a decent education after they graduate from high school without possibly being in debt for the rest of their lives. So you know what we're going to do for all that? We're going to have a Super Bowl watch party. Yeah, that's a great idea, Shakir.
There's a place, here's the beer, and here's a nice place to hang out. Come and hang out with the Democratic Party to watch.
Yeah, and some people, I just say a lot of people can't even afford that. Going to a bar, beers, it's going to cost you a little money. If your argument is this guy is going to change the Democrat Party, forget about it. Ain't going to happen.